Hello, my name is Sarah Gonzalez-Bosinski. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar hosted by the Economic Security for Survivors Project at the Institute for Women's Policy Research. Today we are joined by Policy Analyst Cassie Russell with the Administration for Children and Families. Cassie will discuss a number of ways in which programs serving survivors can support their economic security through financial capability services and asset planning. Before we get started, I just wanted to take a few moments to do some housekeeping. I imagine many of you are not familiar with the ReadyTalk platform. It's pretty simple. Your lines have been muted for the duration of the call, but if you need support, there are two functions on your screen at the bottom left corner. You'll see a blue chat icon and a hand icon. If you're having technical issues, please feel free to reach out to us by clicking on the hand icon, and an administrator will assist you. If you're unable to see your screen but hear my voice, please contact ReadyTalk support at 800-843-9166 and dial *0. Questions can be submitted to the presenters at any time by clicking on the chat icon. We'll be sure to follow up with these questions at the end of the presentation. This webinar is being recorded, and all of you will receive an email with a link to related materials in approximately 1 week. So for those of you who are new with us, the Institute for Women's Policy Research works with policymakers, scholars, and public interest groups to design, execute, and disseminate research that illuminates economic and social issues facing women and their families. We seek to build and empower individuals and organizations with women-oriented policy research in 5 key program areas. They include employment, education, and economic change, democracy and society, poverty, welfare, and income security, work and family, and finally, health and safety. The Economic Security for Survivors Project is a national technical assistance project focused on elevating and institutionalizing best practices that seek to build, protect, and restore survivor economic security so that they may be free of violence and abuse in the future. Since 2010, the S Project has conducted over 225 trainings and technical assistance activities, reaching nearly 2,500 victim service, advocacy, and justice professionals nationwide. In addition, we partner with more than 24 programs across 17 states to foster comprehensive community responses, achieve greater justice through economic relief and recovery, and enhance economic advocacy services in victim programs and support programs. Our work includes engaging criminal justice partners to promote practices that reduce financial barriers to victim safety, but also enhance opportunities for economic justice. This includes better aligning legal processes and identifying resources to help reduce the cost of participating in the justice system, as well as promoting economic relief to ensure survivors' independence and recovery. We're also helping to develop and institutionalize curricula and tools for victim advocates with the goals of integrating economic empowerment and employment support services into the core work that's already being done by victim advocacy programs across the country. We know that this is a great area of need, and our goal is to really help them better support survivors seeking good jobs and building financial independence. And finally, we produce a range of policy and research briefs to help educate a broader audience on the links between economic security and safety and related threats and opportunities facing victims. For more information for the work we do, you can visit us at iwpr.org or follow the link for our specific project website on your screen. Economic security and safety are inextricably linked. One critical way to support survivors so that they may be free and safe from abuse is to help build financial independence. There are a variety of ways advocates and domestic and sexual violence programs can help survivors, ranging from financial literacy services to job training programs and asset building resources. So today we are joined by Cassie Russell, who will describe how domestic violence programs in particular can integrate financial capability services into their existing programs. Cassie Russell is a policy analyst with the Assets for Independence program at the Office of Community Services within the Administration for Children and Families at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Prior to this role, Cassie managed in the delivery of financial capability services in a variety of nonprofit settings. She has supported survivors of domestic violence interested in financial and career goals, worked with first-generation college students, and provided training and technical assistance to a network of 60 agencies implementing individual development account projects. I had the pleasure of working with Cassie a few years ago while she was leading a robust economic empowerment program out in Oregon, and I'm really thrilled to have her here today to share her knowledge and expertise with you all. Cassie, thanks so much for joining us, and I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. I really appreciate that warm welcome and the work of the Economic Security for Survivors Project. As Sarah mentioned, I work at the Office of Community Services in the Administration for Children and Families at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. If you're not familiar with ACF, we are home to programs like the Family Violence Prevention and Services Act, TANF, and Head Start, so I'm thrilled to work with them on the day-to-day work that we do here. I see a chat from Charlotte saying, can you increase volume a bit? Charlotte, can you let us know if you're hearing okay now? And if not, I will try to project more. So that brings us to our next slide. We want this to be interactive, so please chat. You guys won't be able to see each other's chats, but we want to hear from you. Thanks, Charlotte, saying that she can hear. So if you have any problems like that, let us know. So if you can take a moment to chat what state you work in and what financial capability means to you, that's great. We will use that a little later on. So even though you guys won't be able to see each other, we will use that coming up. All right, we've got people from Nebraska, Kentucky, Florida. Hi to Beth. I'm originally from Sarasota, so excited about that. Ohio, Texas, North Carolina, Vermont, New Mexico, North Carolina, Washington State, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts. So we've got lots of state representation here, so that's really exciting. So as Sarah mentioned, today we're going to talk about integrating financial capability services into existing programs for survivors and some tools to do that. So first we'll chat about financial capability, and then we'll highlight the potential role of financial capability services in your work. As Sarah mentioned, I worked at a domestic violence agency in Oregon, and I also worked at an agency in Missouri. So I know firsthand what it's like to support survivors and their goals, and know how critical to safety economic empowerment services can be, but also how difficult they can be to implement on the ground. So to that end, we want to provide information on tools and resources that can help you support your work. So we're going to talk about financial capability. Financial capability is the capacity based on knowledge, skills, and access to manage financial resources effectively. So many of you, I'm sure, have been involved in initiatives around financial literacy, which really focused on that first component, the knowledge component. And while we recognize that knowledge is very important, we know that people also need skills and access to resources in order to be able to create the financial future they're envisioning for themselves. So in this little diagram, if somebody is working on managing their money, knowledge would be financial education, so knowing about budgeting. Skills would be the opportunity to practice managing cash flow, so when income is coming in and when expenses are going out. And access might be access to a safe and affordable bank account or a safe place to keep money within someone's household. So we asked you what financial capability means to you, because I just like to highlight here that each person will have a different idea of what it means to effectively manage their financial resources. For some, it might be not overdrafting their bank account this month, or being able to pay a bill in full, while other people might be focusing on other goals like establishing an emergency savings account or saving for a trip. So we just like to highlight that it's really important, and I know that you all know this, to sort of meet people where they're at in supporting their financial goals. Especially money can be a difficult topic to talk about. Okay, so we're getting some questions about the PowerPoint slides. So just to share with everybody, the recording and the meeting will be shared about a week from now. And then we'll also put together links of the tools that I mentioned. So now that we've discussed what financial capability is, one way to support survivors' financial capability is by offering or referring to financial capability services. So we have a document. You can see the URL at the bottom of the screen, and it's called About Financial Capability Services, and it provides an overview of 10 key services. So it covers things like financial education, financial coaching, credit-related services like credit counseling or credit building, access to safe and affordable financial products like depository accounts, and things like free tax preparation. I work on incentivized savings programs, individual development accounts, but also the whole suite of financial capability services. While many organizations think of and offer really strong services around financial education or credit, I also like to highlight that it's important to remember that something as simple as having a flyer of the free tax preparation services in your community can have a large impact on survivors. Right? Somebody accessing a free volunteer income tax assistance site can save $300 at tax time on tax preparation fees. And I don't know about you, but that's a lot of money. So whenever we're able to do those sort of low-touch things, we like to highlight that there's lots of ways to support financial capability, even if that's not a part of your professional role in the moment. So if we go to the next slide, we have a poll for you. So we want to know what financial capability services your organization offers or refers to. You can chat if you have a service that you offer or refer to that's not there. Click Other and then Chat. And it's okay if the answer is none. It's great if you're just here today thinking about offering services for the first time. So we'll take a minute if you can. Oh, great. All right. Great. So in the chat box, I'm seeing that some people are just thinking about offering services. Others are, oh, great. Somebody works in research, so they say that they study these things but don't offer them. Somebody said that they offer children's savings accounts, which are really exciting and sort of a promising practice in the field. All right. So I think you guys should all be able to see the results. So financial education is the most common service. And then I'm really excited to see that tax assistance is also really popular. That's great. Some people are mentioning that they develop curriculum to help survivors and meet those sort of specific needs that survivors have. And then also a lot of people doing financial coaching, which is really exciting. So that's great. You guys are all doing amazing work already. So those are the results. Somebody else mentioned that they provide legal services for survivors, and counsel will often provide services. So that's great. And somebody also mentioned, hi Kate, capacity building services. So that's really great. I think that one of the ways that we can support survivors is that if we have a strength, offering ways to help others implement those same services. All right. So some of you said, okay, so someone asked a question by survivors, what are you referring to? So I'm referring to survivors of domestic violence or sexual violence. Of course, we know that even if you aren't in a role where maybe you don't work at a domestic violence agency, there are lots of similarities with folks who've experienced other kinds of trauma. So just something to keep in mind, that just because this is focused on survivors doesn't mean the same ideas can't be applied to other folks as well. Okay, so some of you mentioned that you're doing individual development accounts or offering individual development accounts. So IDAs are an example of an incentivized savings program. Typically how they work is savings is matched as participants work towards a goal, and it can be funded from a variety of sources. So we're going to talk about the Assets for Independence program. So we are a discretionary grant program administered by the Office of Community Services at ACF, which we talked about earlier. And funds provide individual development accounts and related services such as financial education for 3 specific assets: the purchase of a first home, the capitalization of a business, or to fund post-secondary education or training. So I just wanted to mention here for a moment that AFI did not receive an appropriation in the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2017 that passed on May 5th. Because of a lack of appropriation, there will not be awards. However, because prior awards had a 5-year grant period, there will continue to be AFI-funded IDAs for about the next 4 years. So normally we would talk about ways to seek AFI funding, but that's no longer relevant. But we still want to talk about ways to get in touch with projects. And then, of course, there are also privately funded IDAs supported by foundations and local government that can continue to be resources to survivors. So I'm going to give an example of an AFI IDA project and how an AFI IDA works. So let's say a participant comes in for services and they're interested in saving for job training. So AFI IDAs can be used to fund post-secondary education or training. So in this case, Kim works with a AFI project in her community, and they offer a match rate of $2 for every dollar that Kim saves. AFI IDAs can be anywhere from a dollar for dollar match all the way to 8 to 1. Our most common match rate is 2 to 1 followed by 3 to 1, so that's typically why we use 2 to 1 as an example. So Kim's project allows savings for 3 years, so she saves $55 a month of her earned income, working towards a goal of $2,000 in her IDA. During the time that she's saving, she's connected to other services through the agency like tax assistance and financial education. She saves $2,000 and receives $4,000 in match money. So $2,000 of this is AFI funds, and $2,000 of that is the non-federal share that the AFI project provides. So you can see an image here. So she ends up with $6,000 for job training. I want to highlight that I recognize that $2,000 is a lot of money. We use that example because it maxes out the federal funding, and also because it makes the math easier. But participants in AFI projects can work together to set goals that work for folks. If $55 a month is too much, then that's totally understandable and folks can go lower. So we have a question. Somebody said, I missed what you said about AFI IDAs. Is AFI funding still available? So just to repeat real briefly, AFI did not receive an appropriation in the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2007 that passed on May 5th. Because of this, there won't be future awards. However, there are still AFI projects that will be operational for the next 4 years. So your organization would not be able to apply for future AFI funding, but participants should still be able to access AFI IDAs if there's an existing project in your community. And then just to highlight, IDAs are fabulous, but as I mentioned earlier, they're one tool in a suite of financial capability services. Okay. So who can participate in an AFI project? If you're interested in referring participants to an AFI project, it's just important to note that there is income and asset limits for the program. So it's an either or. So any individual who's a member of a household that is eligible for their state's TANF program qualifies, or any individual who meets an income and net worth test. So net worth is a limit of $10,000, excluding the value of a primary residence and one vehicle. I always like to highlight here that even if somebody has a savings account, if they've built up that asset over time, things like student loans, credit card debts, medical bills are all included. So typically that's not a barrier for folks in the field. Okay. So now that we know who can participate in a project, I just wanted to give a couple of examples. So I'm going to give an example of a program I used to work in, Bradley Angle in Portland, Oregon. So the way that program worked is participants first had an opportunity to participate in a privately funded match savings account where they could get up to $500 for a savings goal, and then they could participate in the AFI-funded IDA. And that program offered credit building loans, career coaching, credit coaching, and a variety of other services. The KDVA, or they redid their name, now they're Kentucky Coalition Against Domestic Violence, has a partnership with their local community college program enrolling folks who are receiving TANF in their IDA program. So it's important to think about, when we're talking about partnering, to think broadly about financial capability and think about supporting the income side, right? So maybe working with job training or education programs or career programs, but also to think of those partners that maybe are sort of flying under the radar, like after-school programs, TANF. We just released a brief that's on our website that I can link to about working with intermediary organizations such as United Way, and then we also just released a series of briefs on partnering with parents and Head Start to support their financial goals. So all of those should be considered when we think about partnering to support financial capability. So this page has our project locator. So if you're looking to connect to an already existing AFI project, that is the website to go to. You can organize it by state. Some AFI projects have partners that open accounts, so it's important to recognize, for instance, you won't see Bradley Angle on the website because we offered AFI IDAs through a partnership with CASA of Oregon. So if you don't see anybody in your immediate community, I would just encourage you to reach out, and then to also seek individual development account or match savings projects that are privately funded or supported by municipalities. So if you are interested in partnering, the Office of Community Services has a tool called Building Financial Capability, a planning guide for integrated services. And there's the URL for that. And I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to talk through some tools. So this is what the guide, we call it the guide for short, looks like. And it's an interactive PDF, so I highly encourage you to go to our website and download it. The guide contains 13 interactive tools. You can use all of the tools or pick the ones that meet your needs. And while the guide was designed specifically to support financial capability integration into existing programs, we've heard from organizations that they've actually used the tools for things not related to financial capability because they're just helpful tools for planning, working with other organizations. So the guide was specifically designed to help organizations like homeownership organizations or organizations with programs for kids or survivors think about how they can integrate financial capability services into what they're already offering rather than creating a standalone program. So we know that in the course of supporting a survivor, you're already having conversations about safety or about education for themselves or their children or about housing, right? Oftentimes that's a big goal if somebody's in shelter to have an apartment of their own. And all of those require finances, and so that can be a common thread. So rather than having a separate program that you refer to, these tools can help you think through, could we have folks in our Youth and Family Services program ask a few basic questions about financial capability so that we can make sure we're getting folks services if that's of interest to them. So one of the big decisions is whether an agency would like to refer, partner, or offer services themselves. So often we get questions about what the difference between a referral and a partnership is. So referring would be finding an organization that provides services and setting up a pipeline to refer participants to those services. Partnering is like a little bit more intense version of referrals where maybe there's mutual referrals or a shared brand. In Oregon, we had a project called Savings for Survivors that was a shared brand of a variety of different agencies in the state. So that would be an example of a partnership. And then doing it yourself is building the internal capacity to embed financial capability services into your programs. They all have a place. There's no right or wrong answer. In my experience, I've offered certain services but then partnered with a community development financial institution to offer a loan program and then referred out for folks who are seeking bankruptcy-related services. So I think it's really important. Sometimes people automatically think that I have to do this myself. Which is great, that enthusiasm is great, but if there's somebody down the street who can be responsive to the needs of survivors and is already offering high quality services, oftentimes referring or partnering with an agency is a great way to get your foot in the door. So if you're interested in referring or partnering, a question that we get a lot is how do I decide or know who to refer or partner to? So Tool 6 has an assessment of community services, and that can be a really nice tool. You can see on the side here, there's sections, and within each section there's tools. So Tool 6 is often really popular if people are trying to do a sort of field scan or survey of what's already happening in their community. And again, this can be used for services unrelated to financial capability as well. That's one of the tools that we've definitely heard from folks in the field that they're using a lot. Just to also highlight on the menu, there's second from the bottom, there's something called the One-Stop Tool Shop. So there's 12 tools, and then there's a cross-cutting section called Making the Case. And Making the Case helps frame why financial capability is important to a variety of audiences, whether that's other service providers, potential funders, board members, leadership. You can use it for a variety of audiences. But the One-Stop Tool Shop is really great because it has all of the tools in one place, and they can be downloaded as a PDF or as a Word document. And the Word document tools are great because maybe your agency uses different wording around financial capability, or maybe your agency wants to tailor a tool because you have advocates in shelter and advocates in community-based services, and you want to have a place in the tool for both of their voices to be heard. So the Word documents are editable, which really allow you to take the tools and make it what your agency is needing. One of the tools to assess in-house capacity is Tool 4, which is on the next page. So if you're thinking of doing it yourself, this is if somebody had an internal Head Start program that they were interested in doing internal referrals for. And you can see here under free tax preparation on the left, they say, yes, we're going to do it ourselves. But for credit counseling, they say, no, we're going to explore a referral. So you can go through this and decide, what do I have the capacity and expertise to offer individually versus what do we need to build partnerships to offer effectively. All right. Feel free to chat any questions about the tools or anything that's been covered so far. So we just like to always highlight additional resources. So the first is a resource from the Federal Trade Commission. This is their site on credit, and it has a lot of great tools and also provides information for consumers. And then on the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau site, we like to highlight a couple of different tools. Your Money, Your Goals is a free tool that helps frontline service providers integrate financial conversations into the services that they're already offering. So if your organization had a program or folks came in and signed up for benefits, then we know that people are already having conversations about money at that time, and Your Money, Your Goals provides those frontline workers with tools. There's a version of Your Money, Your Goals for employers, which is really exciting. I think oftentimes folks in human services are also needing support themselves with finances, and so that's a resource that could be used individually as well. And then there's a version of YMIG, Your Money, Your Goals, for legal services providers. So those are all available for free. And there are agencies that have been trained who offer train the trainers for that. If you're working with a survivor who's having an issue with a car loan, a student loan, a home loan, any of those things, they can make a complaint through the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and there's a link to that. And then they also have consumer-facing resources, and that's the link on credit. And I highlighted credit here just because that's something that came up a lot when I was supporting survivors. And then lastly, the NRCDV has two special collections. I just linked to the one here on credit, but that is a great tool for helping advocates and survivors understand credit. And then they also have one on tax credits, so that might be more timely next winter. We got a question that came in that's a little bit long, so I just want to read it real quick. Okay. So somebody wrote in, when implementing financial security work in New York City, we found practitioners have been nervous about starting conversations with survivors who are in shelter or who do not have employment or who are living in shelter. Some of the strategies we've employed are helping survivors identify and work towards achieving a passionately held goal and putting asset building in the context of advocates' work. What are some of the strategies you've employed to successfully encourage advocates to support asset building work? That's a great question. I don't think there's one right or wrong answer, and I think that's what makes that kind of question hard. So I think that, like you mentioned, having it be focused around a participant-centered goal is really important. So if a survivor is really interested in returning to school or really interested in securing housing, that can be a great place to start. I've often heard that folks wait to start programming until after folks have stable housing and are no longer in shelter. I've offered services to folks in shelter. Some of the tools that we've done to help make it more accessible was to condense our financial education class to two days of the week, so like 2 Fridays in a row or 2 Wednesdays in a row, so that getting that information didn't create a barrier with meeting with caseworkers or seeking employment. And then the other thing that we did is make it timely. So I think that we're seeing an increase in the financial capability field of really focusing on services being timely, and I think that's really important. An individual development account is a great tool, but it's a long-term goal. Federal statute requires that somebody save for 6 months prior to making their first match withdrawal. And many privately funded programs are modeled that way as well. So we had a smaller savings account that people could access immediately, and we saw folks use that in really creative ways to build their resiliency, like using it to pay an old utility bill so that they could get lights turned on at their new place. And I think having that initial win is really important. As far as getting advocates support for asset building work, I think making it easy, right? So providing tools that are relevant to them. And then I think we see this a lot with teachers too, right? It can be really hard to have a conversation if you yourself don't feel comfortable with that. So one of the things that we did was create a toolkit that explained the basics of different services that we offered. And Sarah has that toolkit and can send it out with the follow-up email. So hopefully that answers that question. But I think there's just a lot of, trying new things and then moving on as they're not successful. And of course, I think the most important thing is asking for feedback, right? I know because I've been an advocate, it can be a really stressful position where you're overworked, and adding one more thing can seem really overwhelming. But I think what really helped build support was seeing how having access to financial resources helped people maintain their housing or helped people with their family goals, and sort of supported the outcomes that the other programs were interested in achieving. Somebody asked, is there any special help for survivors of domestic violence that are left with debt or collection accounts from an ex-spouse? So that's a great question. I'm not a lawyer and I can't offer legal advice, but the Special Collection on Credit has a lot of great information, and then many legal aids will help with that as well. Okay.
I should also, Cassie, I just wanted to add another technical assistance provider that might be able to help with that issue is the Center for Survivor Agency and Justice. They do a lot of work around consumer rights issues, and they can be found at csaj.org.
Yes, and I saw they just came out with a new toolkit, I think on Tuesday.
Yes, I've tried to download it. It's huge, but it looks like a fantastic resource.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to look at it yet either, but yeah.
Be a good reading.
Yes. Somebody says it is awesome, so I look forward to reading it. So AFI has a resource center, which is technical assistance related to the program, and our website's on there. We have a help desk that's more for current grantees, but certainly if you weren't finding a grantee on the grantee locator, you could reach out to folks there, and they could get you connected to an AFI project in your community. All right. Somebody else is saying that the center's guide is awesome and that they worked with them on it, so that's really exciting, and that Chapter 5 is on identity theft.
Great.
All right.
So Cassie, I had one question. While all of you who are on the call, please feel free to use the chat function to submit questions, and we'll answer them as they come in. But one question that I've had, mainly as a technical assistance provider who's been working with a lot of direct service programs, when we start talking about money and helping with financial capability, or even talking about career empowerment and the linkages between those, we often feel so much hesitancy from advocates because they themselves feel like they are unable to manage their own finances, so, and then thus, of course, don't feel qualified to support others. Are there any, in addition to the tools that you mentioned, ways that we can help support those frontline workers to feel more confident in their own abilities so they can help survivors?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the things that I always tried to do was just highlight what a strength that could be in supporting survivors. So I think that sometimes having that personal experience to build upon, right? So I was always very open, and self-disclosure is a whole nother topic, but I would say to people, like, I have student loans. I know that it's hard and it's stressful to choose repayment options, or I think it's okay to model not knowing, right? If you're an advocate working in shelter and a survivor comes to you with a really complicated identity theft question saying, I'm not sure, but let's see if we can get on the computer and get connected to the legal aid or other resources in our community who can help with that, because I think that access to resources is such a huge part of financial capability, and modeling for folks how to find resources and evaluate whether that's a safe place to go can be really important. So I think just highlighting that, like, nobody needs to be an expert to support financial capability.
Great. Seeing some comments in the chat box.
Oh, great. Somebody said, I host a virtual monthly forum for financial empowerment professionals. Every meeting I provide a brief presentation on a different topic, and this month they're learning about debt. So that's great. Yeah, there are certainly lots of community resources. I used to co-chair something called the Financial Educators Peer Group, which is a group in Oregon that was modeled after some folks in New York, and it was folks from a variety of fields getting together to talk about their financial coaching work. All right.
Cassie, another question that's been at least coming up that I've seen from other places, even though it might not be showing up in the chat box yet. In addition to the federal funds, which of course are not going to be creating any new grants, what other community resources are typically good places for programs who want to develop similar asset building programs? What targets you recommend?
So some states have tax credits that fund individual development accounts, so that's always an option depending on where you're at. And then I think oftentimes folks try to partner with financial institutions in their communities. Banks can get Community Reinvestment Act credit for supporting financial capability in their communities, and then many credit unions are interested in supporting the financial capability of their community, so those are options. But I think also increasingly we're seeing people get really creative. So increasingly folks are partnering with community colleges and using scholarship funds as a access point for financial education and other services like that. So they might partner and say, hey, could you offer an individual development type product if we offered financial education and helped somebody outline career goals? Partnering with businesses in your community, the Chamber of Commerce or a specific local business. I in Oregon worked with a local grocery store chain, and they were really interested in supporting the employment needs of survivors, and we worked with a local hospital and some other folks there. And often, working with folks and getting them involved on a personal level can lead to funding down the road. So just encouraging that creativity. I worked in a really small town like 8 years ago now, but we had a homeownership IDA, and the Realtors Association in town funded that quite often because having folks who are ready to purchase homes helped their goal of employing realtors. So sort of looking for those more niche things that meet the needs of your community.
Great. And along those lines, it looks like we have a question asking if there's anyone working on policy ideas around the issue of economic security for victims. This individual had worked towards getting a state-level IDA for rural communities, but that didn't pass. Are there other policy initiatives that you maybe know of, or those of you who are on the call might be able to enter in the chat box that are happening across the country?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I definitely think that's more of a chat box question. I can't really speak to local policy in my current role. But hopefully that's something that we'll see more and more of. And then I saw a question from earlier, what is the intersection of financial education and prevention? So full disclosure, I am not an expert in any way in prevention, but I think just as we teach people about healthy relationships as a way to prevent domestic violence, in that healthy relationship education, right, there should be a financial component, because I think it's really important for people to know that, accessing somebody's bank account without their permission, or something that might seem like a good thing at face value, like having a family budget, can go too far and then have elements of power and control. But people should chat in other ideas, and we'll share them with the group. I think that's a really important question that I haven't thought about too much. So.
Yeah, and I think that I recently saw a study, and I'm going to forget the numbers, that we're trying to look at financial coercion in early relationships, even among adolescents. And one of those outcomes was the importance of that financial education early on as a way to, as you mentioned, model those healthy relationship behaviors.
Yeah, and I think also just financial education generally, right, if folks are able to start building financial resources and practice that, then hopefully somebody will have enough resources where if they're in an unsafe situation and they determine it's best for them to leave, that they have that option. Somebody else asked, have you seen partnerships with or referrals from WIC or Healthy Start agencies? Certainly. I think typically I've seen partnerships or referrals with sort of TANF or family services more broadly, which are often housed with WIC and Healthy Start agencies. But I think there's an increasing push to connect financial capability to physical health, because we know the research shows that there's a connection there. But I think that's a really great idea as a place to get referrals from or partner with, especially since folks participating in WIC would typically be eligible for AFI IDAs or other programs.
Okay. Any other questions coming in? I also welcome those programs who are doing some innovative work to share that in the chat box, and we'd be happy to share the work you're doing with others on the call to help connect those of you who are doing some, creating some amazing projects across the country, so we can learn from one another.
Yeah, certainly. There's a lot of innovation in the field, and it's always great to be able to share that.
Yeah, I see that, some of the comments, New Jersey's doing some really great work, and you had mentioned Kentucky earlier on. If I remember correctly, I think Maine has some interesting projects at the local level. So feel free, now it's a good time to brag and share with your colleagues.
Yeah, somebody mentioned providing legal services, and I think that can be a really important connection, especially around identity theft or the potential for bankruptcy.
Great. Okay. Question for the rest of you. One of our participants is curious to know if anyone's working on advocacy for policy reform on economic abuse within legislative agenda. So if anyone's working on some of those policy issues, that'd be great to share. There's a lot of work to be done around that. Again, I apologize that we can't have a community chat, unfortunately, on this webinar platform. It's one of our many requests for future meetings. Any other questions or comments? Okay, see an answer. Not working on policy, but yeah, perhaps there's a way that we can we'll be sending up a follow-up email, and hopefully people can connect that way. We do have an email list served for our Economic Security for Survivors project, so we'd be happy to continue some of these conversations so we can share what's happening at the local level, so we can try to think about that doing in our own local communities. Oh, great. We just had someone share their Survivor-Centered Economic Advocacy project, and we'll share that link. Thank you for sharing that, Charlotte.
That's great, Charlotte. Thank you for sharing.
Let's see. And Kate just shared that the Human Resource Administration just mandated agencies providing services to domestic violence survivors receiving money from the administration needs to employ financial security in their work. Which state is this, Kate? New York City. Oh, great.
Nice. That's really great.
So we'll be happy to share so you all can follow up. Oh, thanks, and Mallory's sharing that with all of you so some of those links can get out there. And we'll be sure to share the information that was included in the follow-up email next week. Great. And are there any other questions for Cassie about some of the work that she's helping to facilitate at the your very, very long title of agency? I keep on forgetting.
It's okay.
Yep.
Yes, ACF, yeah. Well, I just really appreciate you all taking the time today. I know what a commitment that is, and I know that you guys are all working on really innovative stuff. So that's really exciting, and they'll share the presentation, and I'll put some links in there to other resources as well.
Yeah, and huge thanks to you, Cassie. I know that some of the tools that have been developed are really quite useful. I was playing with the toolkit the other day. There's a lot in there to look at. And I also have the toolkit that you had mentioned earlier that I can share with everyone. There's a lot of great resources out there, and hopefully we can continue to share with one another about what's working and what challenges there are in the community so we can all better serve the survivors we're working with. I'm going to just turn the screen to the last page. So if there's any questions, you can feel free to reach out to any of us on the S Project team, and we'll be able to help out, and we can probably connect you with Cassie as well if you have specific follow-up questions for her. As I mentioned, we are recording the webinar, and we'll be sharing the materials and the additional links and resources we mentioned via email probably sometime next week after the long holiday weekend. Well, I want to thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate your attention and time, and really want to thank you again for all the amazing work you're doing in helping to promote economic security and justice for survivors. Thank you all, and thanks again, Cassie.
Thank you.